delighted to welcome Nikola Rothemeyer here today. Nikola is one of 5 artists who is responding to the current exhibition, an anatomical chart of love pains, which is a chapter taken from Orhan Pamuk's book, A Museum of Innocence. Nikola's drawings, some of you probably have seen them on our website and also on the Current Spring Guide. Her practice is primarily drawing, and Nikola has been making a series of drawings called Frauenzimmer from 2006 to 2011. She'll be talking about some of the earlier works today, but some of the later works you'll actually get to see on the screen as well. Some of those images or some of those drawings you will also see in the current exhibition, which are, I suppose, parallel states of mind to words, I suppose, that Nikola would have responded to in the chapter in the book, A Museum of Innocence. Nikola she studied in Berlin. She did her MA in Berlin in the Kunsthochschule Weissensee, and she also spent a period on residency in Glasgow as well, Glasgow School of Art. Nikola also has received several scholarships, Day scholarship, notably to Buenos Aires, and she also received a project award to produce a book called Pillow Book, which is here, and Nikola will also be talking about that as well. And she received that from the Kunsthaus Kloster Gravenhorst, also in Berlin. So really, I suppose, just to say that Nikola's work is rooted in magic realism, but in the context of everyday life. So it's very much, I suppose, it's quite different to surrealism in that sense. And some may view Nikola's work as being political, but it is actually coming from a personal perspective. So I'd like you to welcome Nikola Rothemeyer.
Well, hello, and thanks a lot for this very nice introduction, and of course for being invited here to this wonderful place to do an exhibition, or being part of an exhibition. Yeah, I would like to show you a few examples of my work and introduce a few projects which I've been doing throughout the last few years. And I will also talk about the things that inspire me, or the medium of drawing itself. And I hope that in the end you will have a lot of questions to ask. I decided to focus on the medium of drawing about 15 years ago when I came to Berlin, and I had the chance to work and study with a wonderful teacher, an artist, who gave me a whole new impression of what drawing can be and what it's all about. And that basically there's no right or wrong in a drawing, and that it's a lot more than studying nature or doing an illustration. So from then on, drawing has become like a personal language for me, which is quite complex and has its very own vocabulary. Yeah, in 2006, I started working on a series called Frauenzimmer, as Marie-Louise already told you. This can be translated with woman's chamber. It's not a really good translation, but it's the best I can come up with. It's actually a very archaic German term, which has changed its meaning throughout the course of time. And it was first used in the 15th century, and it meant a gentlewoman who was taking care of the court while her husband was away. I was very much intrigued by the image this term implies, because it's a connection between a chamber and a woman in one word. So I started thinking about the question, how does a woman turn into a chamber? And this was the question which started off my series. So the first works in this series are all revolving around this kind of metamorphosis. And they're actually in my catalog here. I don't have any examples with me today, but you're very welcome to look at that later on. During this working on this series, Frauenzimmer, I discovered that women turn into chambers. This is a very silent process which happens in the course of everyday life, basically. Well, I've been working on this series for quite some years, and throughout the years my focus changed slightly from this metamorphosis to women who are involved in more or less reasonable occupations. And they're always accompanied by different kinds of animals, like in the image you see here, where a woman is making a dress out of peacock feathers. And somehow I'm always very interested in these tasks. I think you call them Sisyphean tasks, because they reflect a lot about my own work. So when I'm drawing this woman making a dress out of peacock feathers, she has a lot to do with myself sitting in the studio making this drawing. I'll just show you a few more examples of this series. Sometimes people ask me how I get the inspiration for my works, which is quite a difficult question to answer, really, because in a way everything and everyone can be inspiring in one way or another if you let yourself be inspired. And somehow the images, they come to you while you're working, as probably many of you know who are working in art yourself. So these images choose me. It's not the other way around. In this context, I very much admire an Argentine poet called Jorge Luis Borges, whose favorite subject is, amongst others, the tiger. And he said that the tiger always finds the way into his writing. He doesn't know why, it's just always there. And even when he tries to write about a leopard, it's always a tiger in disguise. This is just an exhibition view from my gallery in Berlin, to give you an impression how the works look in original with the frames. And you can see they're quite small formats. And I feel very comfortable with this small size, and I think it fits the intimacy of the subject, Frauenzimmer. And also, I very much like that the viewer has to come up very close to the work to really view it well, and he almost has to enter into it. You cannot stay at a large distance. In this series, the next project, I would like to show you an image which has found me out, like I was explaining earlier. I had a show in my Berlin gallery, and amongst others I showed 3 works from a series called Beyond Interiors. And during the opening, a writer came up to me and she asked me if in this image I had done a portrait of the 3 fates, which are 3 mythological goddesses who determine the future or the fate of each person. So the first of these fates is spinning the thread of life, the second one is winding it up, and the third one is cutting it, symbolizing death. And the very strange thing about this was that I hadn't heard about the 3 fates. It was something new to me, and I was quite amazed when I looked up images on the internet that it was more or less exactly the same image I had come up with. So this might be an example of collective subconscious images being within you which you don't know of. Well, except for in my image, the third fate is actually not cutting the thread, but she's making a piece of fabric, so it's not as fatal. I'll just show you 2 other examples of the same series, which were actually inspired by a trip I did to Wales. So all these trees and things you see, they actually exist. The thread is also the subject of my next series. In this case, it's the thread of a caterpillar, namely the silkworm, which produces the silk thread. A couple of years ago, I'd been invited to do a show in a small city in Germany called Krefeld, which is very renowned for its silk production. So in the 17th to the 19th century, it was a very rich city, but now it has faded and no silk production is done anymore. But I was really intrigued by this history, and while preparing my show, I started collecting a lot of material about the silk production process. And I also went to see museums where you can see how silk has been produced on the historical machines, which was quite fascinating. It's a very complex and very time-consuming process before, how this thread is being made. And I also very much like the link that exists between the thread and the lines in my drawings. So I decided to do to make it the theme for my exhibition. So I started developing a series called Fadenspiele, which can be translated with cat's cradles, this game with threads. So I basically started drawing a portrait of the women who work in this silk production process. And this is the first image. And I portrayed different stages of the process, how silk is made. And for that, I staged models in my studio and asked them to stage some of the old images I had collected. This is something I always like to do, to work with models, because with the images I make from the models, I can really work very much in detail on my drawings, and also I can choose the characters I'm interested in. Well, in this image you can see 3 women who are collecting mulberry leaves, because mulberry leaves is the only thing a silkworm will eat. So you need to collect a lot of these leaves to feed the silkworm so that it produces a silk thread. And this work is called Erstes Fadenspiel Sammeln mit Krallenaffen, which means the first cat's cradle collecting with tarsier monkeys. So each of the works portrays a certain working stage, and it is put into the title of the work. This one is the third cat's cradle. It's called Winding with Star Tortoise. This one is Winding with Tarsier monkey. And this one is Stretching with Armadillo. Well, maybe you realize that my work always has a link to everyday life and to my own life. They're never pure fantasy like in surrealist art. That's why I feel very close to the art of magic realism, which is a term mostly used in Latin American literature. But it all revolves around discovering the wonders in everyday life, which I find very, very fascinating. Well, earlier I had talked about the language of drawing. And for me, creating a drawing is like a translation process. So you have to translate something which is a fantasy or a dream, a fear, or a certain atmosphere into a drawing. So the biggest challenge for me in my work is to find a translation from something that is on your mind into a drawing. And of course, there are always thousands of possibilities of how you can translate these things. I go through the stage of searching for these translations with very small size drawings. And the small size enables me to work faster and also be more spontaneous in my work. And sometimes in this process you come up with solutions that you could never think of yourself. They just come to you by chance, by coincidence. So I collect these small drawings and I sometimes quote what has been happening in the drawing in my larger works, which are a lot more time-consuming and not as spontaneous. But this stage is really very important because that's where the ideas happen. So sometimes I show these, I call them archives of search drawings within a show. This is, for example, in Krefeld, where I did the silk project. This is another example of search drawings for the series Frauenzimmer. Well, as you might have noticed, I go through quite a complex system of working phases while I'm drawing, which includes the staging the models in the studio, doing the search drawings, doing research on contents and my subject, And this is a very time-consuming, very exciting process. So the time somehow is an ingredient for me, which is just as important as my pencil or my paper or the table I work at. In a way, this contradicts the classical image of drawing, which is always spontaneous or fast. I do exactly the opposite. It's very slow. And maybe it has something in common with painting, because it's putting layer over layer. Nevertheless, it's really important for me that I do drawing and not painting. When I was setting up my new works for the show here with Oliver the other day, he asked me how much time I spend for one drawing. And I really very much appreciated this question because it made me realize that this concept of slowness and time is preserved in the drawings, and that it can unfold when the viewer is standing in front of my work. This image was taken at a group show in Germany, in Ravensburg. And I'm showing it to you because when the two curators doing the show came to my studio, they were totally shocked at the amount of time I spent on each work. And they were also shocked when I told them I could only give them 3 works, or could only finish 3 works. But in the end, they translated this concept of time very beautifully in their concept for the show, because they decided to put each of the 3 very small works on very large walls. So there were like 10-meter walls, and you had a very small drawing, which was quite amazing, and it was their metaphor for the time spent in the drawing, the big amount of white space around it. Well, the last project I would like to introduce to you is called Pillow Book, and it was realized as part of a project grant in a small museum in Germany. They give out grants for artists each year who are prepared to do a project in the region of the museum. And this is a very Catholic area, so I decided to do a project on relics. So in January of 2008, I went on a search for relics in an old people's home, which was called St. Elizabeth. And there were 11 ladies who invited me to their rooms for an interview. And by coincidence, all of them happened to be women. And I asked all of these women the same question, namely, which relics do you possess and which are your most precious keepsakes? And this caused a lot of irritation and confusion, but in the end, they told me wonderful stories about very strange objects and things. And I recorded these conversations and stories and put a summarized version in this book called Pillow Book. Then I used the stories I had been told as a basis for a series of drawings, in which I started out from the relic and then try to invent my own story around this object. So in this image, the relic was an image of the St. Mary the Virgin, which was an image in the old lady's room. In this case, the relic was a handmade wooden plate. And the lady who told me the story was actually quite amazing, because she told me that when she was a child, she had to flee from East Prussia, which is now Poland, with her pregnant mother and five sisters. She had to flee from her hometown all across Germany to the west, because it was during the war. So that meant they had to travel on foot for something like 700 kilometers through a country which was in war. And it was very touching the way she said that they weren't able to take anything from their home with them, not even a sewing needle. And then when they arrived safely in West Germany, and they settled down, and then years later, she had a present from someone, namely this wooden plate, and it reminded her so much of her hometown, because that's what they made there, that's a very, very precious keepsake for her. So this plate always reminds her of her whole life story. And then I did this drawing to go with her story. The relic in this picture was a watercolor the lady had painted herself, which was called The Girls of Bremen. Yeah, altogether it was a very exciting process to do these interviews, because the ladies were all in different stages of the mind. Some were very clear, and some were already in their very own world of seeing and perceiving things, which of course was quite, but also quite interesting. Well, from then on, I took my drawings as a basis, and with these drawings I made patterns for hand-embroidered pillows. And these patterns I gave to women working in embroidery club, which was also in the region of the museum. And they translated the drawings into these embroideries on the pillows, so that's where the name pillow book comes from. And originally, a pillow book it's a Japanese term which was invented by a lady who worked in court, and she was always writing in a book she kept under her pillow, so like a diary. So in this project, it's also like many diaries or many stories, or female stories, which were concentrated in the drawings, in these embroideries and in the stories. And the nice thing about the pillows was that they were made on 100-year-old fabric, which was also made in the area where the ladies came from. The project I'm currently working on is called Brief Encounters, which I would very much like you to view in original. It's up here in the gallery in the show, which will open on Saturday. And I think it's always better to see a drawing in original, even though this is fantastic technical equipment. You will never see a good reproduction of a drawing. It's impossible, which makes it also very nice to work in the medium of drawing. Yeah, then I thank you very much for your attention, and thank you to Seamus for inviting me here for this show, and to everyone else giving me a very warm welcome in Sligo. Thank you. Oh, thank you. It's always good to hear. Thank you. Are there any people here who do drawings themselves? Ah, that's good. That's true. Thank you. Yeah, it's a good question. It has a lot to do with the fact that I always work in series, and before doing a series I set myself borders. So I decide on an image size, a theme, and the colors I choose. So these borders somehow help me to experiment a lot more than when I have all the options and all the colors of the world. And I guess it's also a personal preference, choosing these colors. It's more or less black and white images added with red, and somehow I stick to these colors. Maybe that's a good way to put it. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, what I kind of like about drawings is that they open up a dialogue if everything goes well. You know, if someone stands in front of a drawing and he starts telling me a very different story than what I had intended, then I'm really happy, because I'm just throwing a ball into the audience, and I'm always, it's the best thing that can happen if you get feedback. So concerning the text of Pamuk, I have very great respect for literature, and I always try to create a parallel universe if I work with literature. So in this case, it's really, I got inspired by certain sentences, certain words that he uses, which mostly have to do with a state of mind where I could, get inspiration. So it's really between the lines of the text that you can get the connection. I don't know if that's a good answer for you. That's true, I didn't actually say it. I can't really answer you because, for example, these drawings, they all were created at the same time. So I always have more works up in the studio, and I start working on one, I leave it, and then I go to the next. So the 5 works which you can see in the exhibition, they were made in 3 months. And that's working 7 days a week.
Could I just ask,
Hmm.
Doesn't that, in a sense, sort of in some way undermine the kind of pleasantness of you or of the artwork?
That's really interesting question, because when I did the concept for this project, I didn't think of that. And then, of course, during the course of this work, then I had to, you know, see how it goes and see how my image is being translated into the embroideries. And at some point I just had to say, okay, there's something else happening. I mean, they did beautiful work, but of course it is something else. It turns into a different thing. But it was a point which didn't occur to me before the project. It came later, which is a very interesting thing of when you give your work to someone else to finish it. Mm. Well, as I said earlier, some things just come up while I'm working. So I started including animals in my drawings in 2008, I think. It was nothing that I decided, it just happened. Yeah, I think so. And you might notice that it's all wild animals, they're not domestic ones. And certain animals, I love bats or porcupines or armadillos, and they always reoccur. And I think the animals, they're a stepping stone towards a fantasy world, or this magic realism I was talking about, because they are animals which do exist, but not in this context. Or they are larger than they are in real life, or totally out of place, which makes that's it. I think it has many reasons. The first one maybe being when I came to Berlin and I started working with this amazing female artist who's also just focused on drawing. She does totally different work, but she's focused on it.
Who was that?
Sorry?
Who was the artist?
She's called Nikola Rothemeyer. I think I like, just simply, I like the feel of the pencil and the paper. It's a very direct way of working. So what's on your mind can go directly on the paper. You don't have to prepare anything, really. I like that. And maybe also that drawing has a kind of niche, because it always used to be something that was just used to create a different work, a sketch for a sculpture or a painting. And I find very exciting what is happening to drawing lately, that it's changing so much, and it's become a very own, how do you say, medium, thank you, a very own medium. Well, I'd love to leave it to you. I I think I'll stay with the drawing. But it's nice because I have had this from a performance artist I very much like. I had this question before, and I think it's a great idea. But there's so much to discover in this drawing world. It would be too much for me. Thank you.